Okay, well, thank you so much. Now, I know you've heard a lot of presentations today, and so I thought maybe I'd do something just a little different today. I'm going to be telling you a lot of stories today, and it's going to take some twists and some turns, and there's a lot to cover. So I want you to settle in, and I'm actually going to tell you a little story. We're going to read and have story time. There's a lot of people right now are trying out a lot of different ways to engage. And so I love telling stories. So we're going to tell that story right now. So join with me right now. Now, once upon a time, a long time ago, I started my career at Salesforce as a technical trainer. Now, why is that important, you say? It's important because it's where this exciting journey of the idea of the community hatched in my brain. Now, back in those days, remind you, I was employee 176. Out of now, when I left, there was 48,000. Now, Salesforce wasn't really actually a job. Folks woke up one morning and their boss said, guess what? We've invested in this CRM thing and you're going to be running it. Now head to Salesforce and take that training. This is where I enter the story. I share all my Salesforce knowledge with them, pouring all my energy and effort into these students for 5 straight days. We talk about how they can transform their businesses using Salesforce, and they did the same with me, and they poured their energy and effort into me. Now, they asked questions, they shared ideas, and they learned from one another. They all came from different backgrounds, different industries, different size organizations. And I realized early on that these were the change makers of our customers. They were the core to making this successful in their companies. Now, after the class wrapped up, they were heading back to their respective parts of the world, and they had to fight that change on their own. I found this so sad. And I thought, what is such a miss? I thought to myself, why isn't there just one single place for them to continue these conversations and share ideas? Well, after teaching hundreds and hundreds of students each week in and out, the idea never went away, and each passing week, the idea grew stronger. It was a simple goal to create a place where customers, well, really admins, could go to get their questions answered, share their ideas with each other. And I finally got the courage to pitch this idea to at the time I was in marketing, to our CMO. He was very data-driven and very analytical in nature. I created a PowerPoint presentation with all the data I could muster because at the time, data was not my friend. And he looked at me sideways and he said, I don't know, that sounds like a silly idea. Well, he let me give it a go as basically my side hustle and gifted me the URL success.salesforce.com to build from. This is the first look right here at our beautiful community, and I say that in quotes. Despite its rough around the edges look, it took off because it provided just what the goal set out, answering questions and connecting with others. Now, I swear to you, this is what he said to me. I know you don't believe it, but in the sense I was incredibly stubborn, and those of you that know me know that I'm stubborn. And I'm actually glad that he said those words to me because it was the exact motivation I needed. I knew I was going to prove him wrong and make this beautiful community work. Now, it was gaining big momentum externally and fairly organically. I didn't have the marketing budget or any budget for that matter. In fact, I like to brag that I built this Salesforce community on my Amex card, which is not entirely far from the truth. I was entirely focused on tapping into the power of our most passionate advocates and keeping the community afloat. I often now say the very best way to build an authentic community is to try and do it without any money or resources, because then you truly have to build a strong and trusted relationship. You have to do the work. You have to truly roll up your sleeves and get into the details of engaging. We were adding nearly 25,000 new members each month, which may sound a lot, but we had millions and millions of Salesforce users at the time. So I had a long way to go. Internally, Salesforce was much slower to adopt the new way to engage with customers. The curious internal adopters would see the activity and often say, well, what is the secret sauce, Erica? And how do I get engaged? And they were always, of course, looking for that silver bullet. Okay. Now, At the time, I didn't have a succinct answer for them, but reflecting back now, this is at the very core of the success. It's a term I hadn't heard before, and I don't know if you've heard it either. This is something that I'm very passionate about now, and something I now work to enlighten all my clients about when setting up a community strategy. The key being put the needs of the customer first. This was a big mind shift for Salesforce. I was suggesting a longer process by putting the customer success before thinking about metrics and sales, saying that would come later and in a more powerful way if you shift the focus to the customer. I suggested that by putting the customer first, it would eventually lead to driving company success. But this was not something I had yet to prove, and that will come later in the story. I also felt that I was not only the community that was there to serve, I also was there to serve the company, to serve Salesforce. This sparked the first ember of an idea that customer programs should all function this way, that the community, if even in its fledgling state, offered such value to organizations outside of marketing. I saw the value it brought to product with product innovation and ideas, customer success with relationship building at scale and driving down attrition, support with case deflection, sales with larger deal sizes and local engagement, and marketing with brand awareness and advocacy, each with different value propositions, but value nonetheless. Now, but the flicker of that ember never went out, even though I didn't prove that right away. It grew stronger and stronger with each passing year. Now, the momentum, it kept going and it really started to pick up. When luck would have it, Salesforce decided to build a community product. I was no dummy and I got in line quickly to migrate to this new platform. Not for the reasons you'd think, because being on a V1 product, we all know, is not always the best experience. But I was hell-bent on being the best use case for our product. I knew that customers looked to us as a best practice example for using our product, and I wanted this for our community. Plus, how amazing for our sales teams to have a thriving customer on nearly day one of a brand new product. I knew I would be leveraged as a use case for our sales and customer-facing teams, which would then in turn build awareness for our community, killing two birds with one stone. Up until this point, I had not focused on building internal awareness because I was too busy driving external awareness. Now, to give you some context, we had about 550,000 members on our community prior to migrating to this new platform. Also sounds good, but remember those big numbers of customers we had. And 6 months after migrating, we hit the 1 million member milestone. My head was literally spinning and I was thrilled. Some critical things happened that added to this growth. Number one, single sign-on, making it super easy for customers and for employees to have a new way to connect. Adding collaboration, which is shocking we didn't have until then. And being the single biggest and most engaged B2B community on our platform on day one. The community continued to grow and word started to spread internally. My role started quickly to change, to turn from community builder to community protector. I realized that this was a new way to engage for our customer-facing teams. It reminded me of when social was just ramping up. No one really knew about how to engage with customers on social, and they were a bit gun-shy without some guidelines. Now, yes, I am old, and I do remember the world pre-Twitter. The natural way that our teams wanted to engage was talking at our customers and pushing product and messaging to them versus actually engaging and earning their trust and taking a longer tail approach. I didn't want the community just to be a channel to push messaging, so I became the protector and the enabler. And the journey continues. Then came a tipping point, or as Malcolm Gladwell calls it, a turning point, as Malcolm Gladwell calls it, a tipping point. Now, even though the community was gaining all this momentum, I was still a team of one, having difficulty proving out the true value of community. Channels were popping up left and right, and I was losing the ability to manage engagement. Headcount was golden, and without proof points, I was getting passed over time and time again. I came up with what I thought was a great idea to grow my team without headcount, was just to invest in our most passionate advocates and make them extended team members. Hence the birth of a program called the Salesforce MVP Program. The vision of this program being simple and the same way that it is 9 years later, being to reward and recognize our most passionate advocates for their leadership, expertise, and ongoing contributions to the Salesforce community. We had 15 members in our first MVP class, and I'm pretty sure if you asked them, they did not think that this program was going to last. In the early days, the rewards and recognition portion of the program were pretty rudimentary, but they were all based on gaining more access and reputation than the average Salesforce customer. When I asked them what their number one reward would be, they all agreed that it would be a photo with Mark Benioff, our CEO. In my mind, I rolled my eyes because I would likely be able to pull off any other request but that one. Well, I reached out to Mark Benioff's chief of staff and asked the possibility of this photo opportunity. And he said it was a tough ask, but the best way to make it happen was to go out and buy a camera. Yes, he actually said that. Come to the next Salesforce event in Washington, sit front row. He said if he gives me the eye after Mark is coming off stage after the keynote, that I should come up and ask for the photo. He said to set expectations with the MVPs that it likely would not happen. So I went out and bought that camera. I arranged for front row seats for the MVPs in Washington, which, by the way, was a huge hit in and of itself. Having a reserved sign with their names on it in the front row of the keynote was a coveted reward that we still get today for all the major events. And then I headed out to Washington. The keynote wrapped up, and sure enough, I got the eye from Joe, and I went running up to Mark with my brand new camera. I quickly rattled off who I was and what the MVP program was, which is the beauty of having a clear and concise vision statement. And I asked if he would mind posing for a picture with our first MVPs. Well, his look changed, but he agreed. I could see in his eyes, he wasn't happy, but he willingly agreed. He towered over them, like you can see in this picture. He towers over actually everyone. But he smiled and he took the picture. He paused then after the picture and he turned to Matt, who's here in the picture in blue, and he asked him what he thought about the keynote. It was in the era back then of the social enterprise. Matt looked up at him and said, well, I thought it was okay, but I didn't really get it. I felt like it was disjointed. Well, my heart literally stopped. I hadn't prepared any of the MVPs to actually talk with Mark. I had no idea he was going to do this. I hadn't really even actually talked to him myself up until that point. I thought, well, my run at Salesforce was fun, but I'm definitely going to get fired. But something amazing happened. He called over Al Falcione, his master keynote writer, and he said, Al, come over here and bring a pad and a pen. Now, I want you to say all of that you said to me. I want you to say it to Al, and I want to hear each and every one of your thoughts as well after that. Now, this is what the scene looked like. He went one by one, and he heard their input on the keynote, me snapping this picture and Al by my side scribbling notes. Once he stood focused and he heard each MVP, then he looked at me and he said, who are you again? And what do you do at Salesforce? Well, I told him that. Well, I had not planned on being there for either of those events, but I said, if you want me there, I will be there. And then he said, do you have more MVPs in each of those locations? And can you make sure that they are all there? Because I want to talk to them after the keynote again, just like this. I replied, yes and yes, but only if you agree to pose for a picture with them before. And I felt so clever. I followed up after the event and sent a summary of who he met and a summary of their feedback. I also proactively sent him who he was going to meet in Boston and Minneapolis. The guy is honestly a genius, and he remembered everything I sent him. And when he met them, he called them by name. It was something special to watch. This is a picture from the third event with the Boston MVPs. And I think you'll notice by Mark's body language that, and even his smile, that it's different from the first picture. This was the moment I knew this program would live on in the best possible way. Now, remember, I told you that this was a journey filled with all sorts of twists and turns. Well, it definitely was a crazy journey. So let me continue and fast forward you about a year from that moment. Mark definitely got me and the MVP program on the map, but I still had a long way to go for broader awareness. I was at a leadership offsite with about 150 of Salesforce's top leaders. I felt like a fish out of water among all these crazy smart people, and it was my first time attending this offsite. The goal of the offsite is to reflect on the previous year and plan the roadmap ahead. It's a collaborative approach that has always been impressive to me. We call it the V2 MOM: vision, values, methods, obstacles, and metrics. During this offsite, as a group, we ruthlessly prioritize the year's events. Each table at the event is tasked to provide feedback and input on a particular V2 MOM method. Then we go around the room, and as a table leader, each one stands out and reads out the feedback that they gathered. Now, my boss encouraged me to volunteer to be a table leader because she said it's great exposure for me since it's my first time at the offsite. So it came to me, and I did my table readout, did my thing, and I went to sit down, and I heard this booming voice come through the mic, and it said, "Wait, Erica." Oops, I skipped a page. Now, it said, what do the MVPs think of lightning, is what Mark said. Now I froze because this had nothing to do with what the table readouts were going on. It was totally off topic, but I turned to look at Mark and he was dead serious. Now, without going into too much detail about what lightning is, it's a new platform and it was pretty radical change for our customers. It's also very early days and I had not heard great feedback actually from our community and our advocates. I was faced at that moment with a dilemma. Do I tell him the truth or do I just blow it up and say, "Oh, good"? Well, I went with the only thing I know, and it's honesty. I said, "Well, Mark, they're excited about the change, but they're struggling with it right now. They're looking for more feature parity and they feel like we've released it a little bit too soon." It was dead silent for a minute and my heart was racing. Mark said, "Oh, that's really good feedback. Hey, Lightning PMs, did you hear that? Also, my exec team, are you following all the MVPs on Twitter and responding?" Now, this could have been a disaster, but I had already been working cross-functionally with the product organization to get these customer programs aligned with their roadmap planning. So I wasn't saying anything that PMs didn't already know. But this was critical for the other execs in the room to hear. Many of them didn't even know what the community was or the MVPs or the programs that we had. This was another tipping point, and they came clamoring to me after that to figure out how to follow them and how to engage. It was beautiful. Now, continuing on with our story here. Now, I was firing now on almost full cylinders with great exposure from the offsite, community gaining momentum faster and faster externally. And now the execs knew that since Mark cared, they should probably care too. My manager at the time gave me some great advice at this critical juncture. She said she saw how hard it was for me to run this whole operation by myself with just one headcount. She said it's time to leverage all this momentum and lay the groundwork for more foundation and more investment. And she said that's in the form of data. You need to take a step back and align your metrics with the organization's goals, or you'll never grow. I didn't know a thing about how to do this, but I was determined to do it. Now, I was fortunate enough to work with a brilliant data scientist who helped me wrap my brain around how I was going to measure the community. It says nothing, just like Theodore Roosevelt said here, nothing in the world is worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. Now, I didn't know how the data was going to turn out. I'd only been working with industry benchmarks like a lot of people do up until this point. The data scientist and I picked pipeline, deal size, adoption, and attrition as the top 4 metrics that we had big impact on the organization. We then simply took a look at the customers that engaged in the community versus customers that did not engage in the community. Now we saw that engaged customers brought in 2 times more deals to the pipeline. The deal sizes were 2 times larger. They were engaging with the product over 33% faster, and they were 3 times less likely to attrit as a customer. And it didn't stop there. I was hooked on data and I was jonesing for more. Even though I was not in the support organization, I wanted to prove one of the most common metrics was this case deflection. We calculated by looking at the number of questions per month, which was 4,000, 83% being answered by our customers, not Salesforce, and approximately 22 page views to each answer being called to deflection, times the cost of what a phone call costs. And we came up with an astounding $2 million in monthly cost offset. I'm not sure this is going to surprise you, but data was a game changer. When you see industry benchmarks, you're like, meh, okay, but is that real for us? Salesforce is big on this. They don't really subscribe to industry benchmarks. They like to blow them out of the water. The data was the final star to align. Fast forward our journey now to about 2 years ago, and the result is this beautiful page right here. A cohesive set of community programs where our customers go to learn, connect, give back, and have fun. And the cherry on the top was I finally had a community marketer that could bring this all to life. Now, here is the crescendo part in the journey where you finally see the strategic differentiator part of the story of this presentation coming to view. Now, in all honesty, and in any good story, there are many times when the main character wanted to give up. In fact, I probably gave up over 10 times in my mind, but something would always keep propelling me forward. And that was usually some incredible story of a community member, and that was impacted by all of our programs. Then this statement happened. Now, while I'm not in love with this analogy, the meaning behind it makes me so happy. In fact, this happened for Salesforce before this statement even started bubbling up mainstream. In essence, it means that your community and your customer programs are your strategic weapon. They are your competitive differentiator, your strategic advantage. And here's how it showed up for Salesforce. The image on the left is what Salesforce calls its architecture. It's everything that's critically important to Salesforce. And if you look around the wheel, you'll see all the products and services as well as the platform with the customer smack dab and in the middle. That's because they've always been a customer-centric company. But if you look a little closer, you'll also see the Trailblazer community. And you know you've made it when you're represented in the middle of the architecture. This is actually even more important because it's part of the corporate certification program at Salesforce. Every customer-facing employee has to be certified on the corporate talk track, and this wheel and everything on it has to be in a script. You have to be able to explain every element, which also means you need to explain the community. Every element is a part of the strategic differentiator for Salesforce. Now, the image on the right is also a slide pulled from the corporate certification presentation. For this one, I pulled out the exact talk track so that you can see that Salesforce considers the community to have a significant influence on the revenue growth of the company. Of course, it's not the only thing that contributes to growth, but this demonstrates how critically important the community had become to Salesforce. Now, here comes the moral of the story. Most of my career at Salesforce did not follow a traditional path. I'd heard this word entrepreneur not long ago, and it really struck me. It described my journey at Salesforce nearly exactly. I was so fortunate to work for a company that let me take risks, try out crazy ideas, and encourage me to turn them into scalable, profitable ventures. It led me to achieving a big goal at Salesforce, which was even more impactful because it didn't have a path laid out before me. I ran the Trailblazer community, and I felt like a Trailblazer literally myself. Now, when I got my VP promotion, 3 things happened that I never expected. Number 1, I celebrated because I had been working toward this coveted title, and it's a big deal at Salesforce. Number 2, the Trailblazer community celebrated because it meant that Salesforce was recognizing the value of community. And number 3, the industry celebrated because it meant the community was really progressing and becoming a valued part of organizations tied to true business value. It was everything. So like any good journey, here's the summary and the ending of the learnings and how you can walk away and make this a reality in your organization. And I hopefully think you can happen a little bit quicker than I achieved it. Now, fall in love with data, take a servant leadership approach, build incredible cross-functional relationships, give executives bite-sized ways to engage. Don't rely on money or resources, just do the work. Always find what's in it for them and persevere, persevere, persevere. Sorry, my pages are, see, it's a true book. Pages are sticking together. Now, before we open it up to some potential Q&A here, if we have time, I wanted to leave you and make one small little plug for a new podcast that I just recently launched with another rockstar community leader, Brian Oblinger. The podcast is unique because on each episode, we pick a topic, We go deep and deliver the insights we've gained from our combined 40 years of community experience. And on bonus, we'll be linking free templates and resources that we talk about in each episode as the added bonus. The first 3 episodes are live, and you should take a listen and let us know what you think. It's called In Before the Lock. And if you listen to the very end of episode 1, you'll figure that out if you don't already know. I wanted to thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope you got a ton out of it today, and thanks for taking that journey along with me.